Stop the nonsense. For more on this, I want to bring in Harley Lippman. He's a foreign policy expert and member of the Dean's Advisory Board at Columbia University Graduate School of International and Public Affairs. Harley, good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
What on earth is going on at your alma mater?
I think this is a good moment to just summarize for all your viewers what the heart of the problem is. And that is that the demonstrators basically have the view that Israel is the occupier and that the people who are being, and they are the oppressors, and the Palestinians are being occupied and they're the victims. So the ends justify the means, and the victims could do whatever they want because they're being occupied. So let me give you a super quick history of the Middle East to clarify things, which is that when Israel was created, it's the only nation that I could think of when I think of the United Nations that was created through the legal purchase of land. Every nation of the United Nations was created through war or violence, not Israel. And when the Zionist movement was created, it was created because Jews were being slaughtered in Europe, and they weren't ever being accepted as equals. So Jews said, we need a country of our own. So they legally bought the land, moved there around the 1900s. In doing so, they created vast enterprises. Why? Because they built roads, electricity, farms. They eliminated malaria. You know, Mark Twain and Herman Melville, two famous American writers, went to the Holy Land in the 1800s, and they said it was nobody there, basically. It was inhospitable. Few Bedouins and some Jews, but basically more or less empty. So the Jews built the land, and by doing so, it created a huge job magnet in the Arab world. The Arab world was mired in poverty, unemployment. It was terrible. So in huge numbers, hundreds of thousands of Arabs moved from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, whole villages emptied out. These were not people who had been there for hundreds of years or anything like that. The overwhelming majority moved there in the 1920s and 30s because Jews created huge employment opportunities. So that's critical because they have this notion, the college demonstrators, that Jews are occupying land of Arabs. And it's just not the case. So I just wanted to briefly explain that. So I think your viewers have a clear understanding of how Israel was created to begin with. And they're the only people from 3,000 years ago that live in the same land, worship the same God, and speak the same language. There are no people from 3,000 years ago that could say that except for the Jewish people in Israel.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people out there protesting really don't even know what they're saying. I mean, free speech, right? But they don't know what they're saying. By the way, video resurfaced of Columbia's university president, Minouche Shafik, just after 9/11, describing terrorism as a form of protest. Now, you're on the Dean's Advisory Board. Are you, like the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, calling for Shafik's resignation?
Well, what I would say is that Columbia has to get their place in order, like the other universities. You're letting gangs and thugs dictate policy to a university. They're bullying students. Jewish students on campus live in fear of their life. They're harassed. They're ridiculed. Gangs of pro-Hamas demonstrators surround Jewish girls going to class, taunt them. Rocks were thrown at Jewish students. Jewish students are really fearful of their life to the point that the rabbi at Columbia University told them not to go to class for the rest of the year, that their lives are in danger, which just shows you have pogroms or near pogroms taking place on American colleges. This has never happened before. It's an extraordinary development. And why it's so significant is that it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. Jews are the canary in the coal mine. So they start with the Jews, but then think of this. During Christmas lighting in Rockefeller Center, pro-Hamas demonstrators went to break up the lighting of the Christmas tree in New York City. There were no Jews there. Jews have nothing to do with it. That's why I'm saying it's starting with Jews, but they're out to destroy our way of life. They're out to destroy Christianity. This is a form of jihad that is taking place all over the world.
Yeah, and that's why we hear them chant death to America as well. What should be done about this?
Well, I think the university needs to crack down on this and say, we're all about free speech. I'm all about free speech, but not when it intimidates other people and not when it calls for violence. The best example is if you had somebody standing there with a white hooded mask on and called for the genocide of blacks or gays or any other group, It would never last. That person would be shouted down, removed. They would never tolerate it. But yet they do it to Jews. That's why it's anti-Semitism. They're calling for genocide of Jews. And that's a horrible thing. We don't want to see anything like Nazi Germany in the 1930s. So we have to stand up for tolerance. This is what this country was built on. George Washington went to a synagogue in Rhode Island and made the statement that the Hebrews are welcome in the United States. We want that theme to last forever.
And there is a clear double standard. So there needs to be a rise up, right, from the grassroots level, because from the top down, doesn't seem like it's happening.
It's not. There's a lack of courage in university campuses. And a lot of this comes from this leftist woke theme that I mentioned earlier, where they just blame white people. They blame anybody of color is right. People who are white are wrong. And again, they have this narrow definition. If you're oppressing, we can do anything to you. And if people are oppressed, they have the right to do anything back to the oppressor. And that's absurd. For one, Israel is not oppressing anyone. Hamas attacked Israel. And by the way, make a statement about Hamas. It's unique in history. Not even ISIS, Al-Qaeda, none of them did what Hamas is doing, which is their strategy is for Palestinians to suffer. This is where they thrive. This is what's extraordinary about these demonstrations to begin with. They want Palestinians to suffer. That's their strategy. They're exploiting the Palestinian people because this is how they thrive in this kind of violence. And we've never seen anything quite like this in history. Yeah. So people have to stand up and say that Israel's not anti-Palestinian. They're willing to live with a Palestinian nation. Hamas wants a caliphate to take over the world.
Yeah, it's scary times. Hopefully people are listening and learning. Harley Lippman, thanks for your time today, as always.
Thank you.
For all our viewers asking